The Week in Bible Prophecy, a Prophecy Watchers podcast.
I'm Gary Stearman, along with Donna Howell. We're going to be talking today about her book. It's called Before Genesis. Donna, it's going to be a great talk because there's a lot in this book, right?
Yes, there is a ton. The book actually does cover a lot of topics, everywhere from the theology and the science that is seemingly at odds, although it's not actually at odds, about what's being described in the very beginning of time, around the time of the great cosmological origin of the universe, and what happened before Genesis was even written. What happened before that?
And that seems appropriate because we're getting all kinds of conversation about UFOs and UAPs and people visiting here from other galaxies and sci-fi and movies. And it's sort of been embedded in the human psyche these days that we're being visited by other people from other times and other places. And we're coming from a biblical perspective. And what does the Bible say? And a lot of people say will go out of their way to say, the Bible doesn't cover the ancient past, like millions of years ago. The Bible goes back a few thousand years, and that's the beginning point. But really, I believe the Bible has a lot to say about the whole sci-fi modality of explaining the human psyche. In other words, we go see those sci-fi movies. We read the sci-fi books to understand like where man came from and where he's going. Well, we've got the Bible, and the Bible is our source. It's our expertise. If we have any at all, it comes from there. And yet a lot of people say, well, the Bible really doesn't talk about those long ago and far away things that science fiction likes to talk about. Well, I would beg to differ from that. And your book, Before Genesis, covers that, I think, rather well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, actually. So when you look at where were we, what were we doing before there was Adam? There's so many different communities that would answer that question differently.
Yeah.
There's a secular scientific community that would say we were still evolving from primordial soup to monkeys to, and so on and so forth. And then there is the Christians. They are largely going to come from the young earth creationist perspective. And that is different from the old earth creationist perspective. The young earth typically, it sees the earth in the ballpark of 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Mm-hmm. And it says that prior to that, there was nothing.
Right.
Nothing but what God would have ordained there to be that we don't know about because the Bible doesn't say anything about it, or that's the running narrative. Then there's the old earth creationist voice that says, no, not all science is wrong. Obviously, not all science is right either, because to paraphrase something that Werner Heisenberg always said was that when we look at nature, we are not observing nature as it really is. We are observing nature through the lens in which we are capable of even observing it.
Wow.
So our method of questioning nature is the lens through which we are seeing nature, not nature itself. So it's not that what we're seeing is actually there. It's that what we're seeing is, it's just entirely what can we take this information to mean in our limited, finite human capabilities. What do we make of it? Well, we've got this scientific theory over there, this theory of time or the space continuum or whatever. Everything that we observe has to go through the lens of everything we've established as a scientific theory or hypothesis before. And that's a limited thing. God in his infinite wisdom is so far beyond that. I mean, there's nothing that limits God to our...
Well, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, what does that say? He created the heavens and the earth at the atomic level, or maybe the subatomic level. He created particulate matter and crafted it in such a way that a certain result would happen. And we don't have a clue when it comes to that level of creation, although we fool ourselves a lot of times and say, I think I understand what God did. And our scientists are now beginning with their electron microscopes and so forth to see at the molecular level. And so they're figuring it all out and how it came together, and they'll be able to duplicate it. And my response is, oh no.
Right.
Not
right.
Not at all. And I think that's your response too, right?
Yeah. Well, and so when you take the topic of young earth versus old earth and you say, what happened in the very beginning? That answer changes dramatically depending on the community that you're listening to. Science has its answer, and the young earths do, and the old earthers, creationists do. What Tom and I wanted to do with this conversation was to say that those groups don't actually disagree or headbutt as much as you think they do. When you get down to the very, very bottom of what each of them are saying, there's bits and pieces of truth in all of them, which makes which actually brings us to this. When you look at the very beginning and you kind of repaint the picture, you see a new chronology that kind of develops. In the beginning, how long ago? I don't know, billions of years, millions of years ago, however long, most observational science demands or whatever, you have the very beginning of Earth. And then this enemy of God, known as Lucifer or Satan, whatever name you want to put on him, the one who said, I will exalt myself above the Most High. This enemy of God came in, took what God had created, formed his own revolution with his own revolutionary leadership upon that planet to turn it into something that it wasn't. He warped the DNA of what God had created. We see this in Genesis 6:4, but that might not have been the first time it happened. So back up to before the time of Adam. He warped what God had created. And is it possible that that's where things like dinosaurs or the bipedal human-looking type creations that we have from the fossil eras that most people would consider the missing link of the Darwinian evolutionary timeline of humanity?
Well, if you just believe the Bible, and my Bible's open to Isaiah 14, which is a classic statement, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, describes an action. Lucifer, basically the son of light, or the one of light, Lucifer. And in other words, he was an originator of something great. And he was obviously worshipped. And he obviously occupied the heavens, or heaven, because he fell from there. And then it says, his idea when he fell was, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. So right away, Satan had a problem. And it was the ultimate pride problem. And I'm going somewhere with this because what this says is, it validates what you were saying just a moment ago. He said, I'm going to ascend above the heights, and I'm going to be like the Most High. And then there's that famous stroke of doom, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, the sides of the pit. In other words, absolute destruction because of what you did. And when you read this, you have to say, okay, where does this fit back into Genesis? Genesis 1:1, 1:2, 1:3. Because it starts in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And this Isaiah 14 quote must have happened sometime after that, and probably before Adam and Eve were created, because when Lucifer came into the garden, he was already
there.
He was already fallen. So how do we put this all together?
Right.
That's the question. And that's what your book is about, basically.
That's right. Yeah. To reconstruct, and again, and I go back to something I was starting to say earlier. This is how we end up finding that the old earthers and the young earthers actually have more in common than they thought. Because you start with in the very beginning, and then God created the earth. Satan fell and took took minions with him who also fell with him, and they corrupted what was the original earth. And then it's almost like you see this moment where God intervenes. He puts the smackdown on everything that's going on. In fact, science even acknowledges the snowball earth theory. It's this theory that in the very, at some ancient period, our earth was covered in water and the water was frozen. Well, it specifically refers to things in the book of Job. It specifically refers to a very ancient time when the earth was frozen. And so you have these verses that actually also do describe this. So what happened next? What happened next? You get into this moment where God brings the judgment down upon the earth, and then he recreates it. How long ago does he recreate it? How long ago does he bring it back to its original glory? If the young earth crowd sees that as approximately 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, I have no problem admitting that it might have been 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, but that doesn't mean that it was the original earth. So we have more in common than we think.
Yeah, and interestingly, as you talk, I go back to an idea that popped into my head at least once a day, and that is that when you read the Bible, it's all about a problem. Something happened that's problematic. And then as you turn page after page after page and go all the way to the end of the Bible where it says, and I saw new heavens and a new earth, for the first heavens and earth had passed away. The whole book is devoted to a problem having happened, and B, there's a solution to the problem. God created Adam and Eve, and the Redeemer came out of that bloodline. And C, there's going to be a new creation. And so that whole picture, giant picture, comes popping into focus when you talk about the things you're talking about right now.
That's something that cracks me up is since, I've been doing this research for far longer than the book's been out, of course. And I've had conversations with some conservative Christians that have said, that's insane to imagine that Earth was here in the very beginning, and then it fell under a Luciferian order, and then God restored it at the time of Adam. That's just insane. The Bible doesn't say that anywhere. Well, yeah, there are a number of verses that do point to that being the truth, first of all. But why is it insane? Do you realize it, fellow believing Christians, that in the book of Revelation, it happens again? God restores the new earth in the book of Revelation. So we already know that it's a matter of God's nature to rescue earth and create the earth anew when something befalls it. Even it says in the Psalms that he restoreth the face of the earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and restoration is the big word. I'm turning to Ezekiel over here, 28:15, referring to Lucifer. Mm-hmm. And it says, thou wast perfect in thy ways. I'm reading the Jacobean here, the King James. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. In other words, Satan was flawed. And we could go on and on about how he fell and why he fell, but he fell for sure.
Right.
He was flawed. He was not God. He would like to be God. He would like to take God's place, if possible, as would every revolutionary. I mean, you stop and think about Karl Marx and then the people who came after that, Lenin and Stalin and Adolf Hitler and Mao Zedong, and all of these people kind of are little models of Satan. Mm-hmm. They're very, very flawed people, extremely flawed, but they think they're perfect. And that is a pattern that's set up in ages past in the Bible.
Yeah, well, it's the same age-old pattern. The Luciferian order from the very beginning is repeated throughout history. Humanity tends to want to do very bad things with power.
Yes.
And when you look at what Lucifer or Satan originally did with that power, it involved humans in Genesis 6:4. And this goes back again to the nature of the Luciferian order, this idea that earth is going to be Lucifer's and that he's going to do something destructive with it. It's not hard to imagine. First of all, we know that it happened in Genesis 6:4. If you take the interpretational view, the supernatural worldview identifies that what occurred in that moment was that daughters of men, human women, had interrelations with fallen angels. And what came of that was a hybrid fallen angel human hybrid offspring. That may not have been the very first time that Satan did that.
Yeah, and I think that offspring is documented in ancient mythology. We call it mythology, but the Greco-Roman mythology, and before that, Assyrian, Syriac mythology, all talks about these weird people, half God, half human. They're called gods. The Greeks called them, the Romans called them gods. But when you read about these gods, you read about a bunch of really flawed characters. They were all so full of themselves, and they were all angry, and they all got, they fought each other, they killed each other, they enslaved humanity, and let's face it, the whole Greco-Roman school of history is based on those gods. Well, who were the gods? And you go back to the Bible, it says, the sons of God came in and married the daughters of men, and horrible things ensued after that. And I think that those horrible things come down to us kind of historically noted as the gods, the Greco-Roman gods and others.
Yeah, so it's not quite as mythological as we would want to put.
Exactly.
And that, if you do, and it's not just the Greco-Roman pantheon, it's every pantheonic religion since the dawn of time. They all identify something that isn't natural, first of all, a half this, half that God, half bull, these weird kinds of monstrosities. Well, if you look extra biblically as well, it's not just the Bible and the Genesis 4 epic and the supporting theology and verses to that particular time, but it goes back even further than that. I know the book of Jubilees talks about it. Eusebius, the historian, talks about it. Some of the cave 4 of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Book of Enoch.
Yes, the book of Enoch and Melchiorre.
You got a bunch of renegade angels that come down on Mount Hermon.
But they frequently take a view of these particular ones I just mentioned. They take a view of something that was happening on the earth, and beasts were eating each other, and they were all half this, half that, and it was just a monstrous time. They're looking at the particular time they are looking at is the without form and void era of Earth's history. So Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, that moment that's described in English KJV language as without form and void. Those words in the original Hebrew, without going too deep into the grammar on all of them, we can suffice it to say those words, tohu vabohu is what they are in Hebrew, are coordinate with judgment. They cannot mean simply that God was in the mid state of creating earth and he's eventually going to turn it into something else. It means in the beginning, the earth had become an uninhabitable wasteland of chaos.
Because of the fall of Satan. And he fell because of pride. And by the way, when the Holy Spirit of God refers to him, it uses this, again, back to Ezekiel 28:15. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created. Now, that's a mouthful, because what do you think of when you think of Satan? You certainly do not think of perfection. You think of the most evil creature in the universe, and worshipped as the dragon in a lot of countries to this very day. The Chinese New Year, they worship the dragon. But the dragon they worship is not someone who is perfect in his ways. He's a fire-breathing monster, and you don't want to get in his way. And so he fell, meaning he was not like God. That is to say, I believe Satan thought of himself kind of as a creator at the level of God. He probably, hey, I'm good enough. I can probably take over and do what God is doing and do a better job. And he was totally duping himself. And the narrative of the Bible is built around that idea. It happened to Satan. It's happened to humanity over and over again, and it can happen to you because you are a creature born in sin. And there's no way out for you except one way, and that is if you follow the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, whom I have provided for you. I gave my only begotten Son, and he was the solution to this entire problem we're talking about here. This book that you've written before Genesis states the problem very well, I might add.
Thank you very much.
And extremely well documented. And I'm a fan of a well documented book, by the way. But what I'm trying to say, putting this whole big picture together, is everybody would like to think of themselves as perfect. And Satan, most of all. Hey, I can be like the Most High. In fact, I can be a better Most High than the Most High is. And everything crashed and burned after that, and we're still in the process of the cleanup as we speak.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and many areas of the Earth's right now, places that you can go and visit right now, archaeological dig sites all across the Earth that are radiocarbon dated to be anywhere between 8,000 to 15,000 years old, and some of them older than that. We're talking about
built with the hands of other men, creatures. We're not sure just exactly who they were.
Well, yeah, no, we don't. But there's hidden intrinsically in these sites is something we can't describe. First of all, some of the stones that were moved from a quarry 10 miles away over land and water. And they are anywhere for, like, in Baalbek, we've got one that is 3.3 million pounds, an estimated 3.3 million pounds.
And there are no wheels big enough.
There were, we're talking pre-pottery Neolithic age here.
Yeah.
A human is not even smart enough to construct a clay pot, but they can move 3.3 million pound stone from a quarry several miles away. That we see some of these things going on in Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe as well. And a lot of these old sites, here's the thing, over and over and over again, we have serpentine or dragonian type iconography built into these sites. Serpent worship everywhere.
Yeah. There's a big one, Sacsayhuaman, with a wall built of stones such as you're describing. And each of those stones weighs, 100 tons? And how you can't carry those, even with today's equipment. And furthermore, the figurine or figure of a serpent is built into that stone set. And how did that happen?
And how did it happen in a pre-pottery time? How did it happen by regular humans in a pulley cart civilization? So, even science cannot explain. Even our secular sciences, who often come forward with an explanation or at least a very believable theory on everything, cannot explain sites like Baalbek and Göbekli Tepe. But you know what they do say about these sites is that it relates to to Genesis-like theology, stories like and I put air quotes around the word mythical.
Yeah.
But that it relates to these ideas that at one point there was something that was serpentine in nature, impregnating women, and these women ran over here and they had strange babies. These stories are being told in stone, in places that the secular scientists are noting are very, very old, prior to Adam. They predate Adam's birth.